have got to go. GMOs have got to go.
GMOs got to go.
Hey, ho, ho. GMOs have got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho. GMOs have got to go.
Hey, hey, ho, ho. GMOs have got to go.
My name is Rachel Treichler. I'm with Food Sovereignty of the Southern Tier, which is a new group that we're forming to work on food issues. I'm also a member of the Green Party and the Sierra Club. We have this rally to march against Monsanto as part of the worldwide March Against Monsanto events today, May 21st. We have a lot of local activists working on GMO issues. Our first speaker is Kelsey Johnson. Kelsey is one of the founding members of Corning Elmira Occupy movement and has done a lot of work on GMO issues. So I'll turn the mic over to Kelsey.
Hello, how's everybody doing today?
Good.
Good. Okay, so we're here today to march against Monsanto. But who exactly is Monsanto? Monsanto is currently listed as a multinational agrochemical and agricultural biotechnology company. They got their start in 1901 selling artificial sweeteners such as saccharin and continue today with sweeteners such as aspartame. By World War II, Monsanto had expanded business into combat. This initially came about by supplying the troops on the front lines with insecticides to help curb the spread of lice and mosquito spread disease. Their miracle product was DDT. Despite all of Monsanto's claims that DDT was perfectly safe, it was banned from U.S. agricultural use in 1972 after it was shown to have carcinogenic effects on humans, and when Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, revealed that it had directly led to the decline in the bald eagle population by softening the shells of their eggs. Monsanto was able to continue with huge success in chemical warfare by supplying chemicals such as Agent Orange faster and cheaper than their competitors. Over 1 million Vietnamese civilians and 100,000 U.S. troops were exposed to what is now known to be one of the most toxic chemicals on the planet, dioxin. Those exposed experienced nausea, rashes, headaches, extreme fatigue, depression, violent rage, nerve damage, cognitive problems, cancer, and continued birth defects and deformities. In addition to those affected during the war, residents of Nitro, West Virginia, have been poisoned for decades due to contamination from a Monsanto plant where Agent Orange was manufactured. You would think that after such a horrible history participating in chemical warfare, Monsanto would have taken a higher moral standing. Well, you'd be wrong. Monsanto continues to produce white phosphorus, which has most recently been used against Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Monsanto's exploits in the food industry have left little room for inspiration either. Their development of styrofoam was discovered to leach neurotoxins when in direct contact with warm foods or drinks, alcohol, and acidic foods. Moreover, styrofoam has been called one of the world's largest environmental waste products and is considered the main component of marine debris worldwide. And all of this brings us to GMOs. How can a corporation with a century-long history of illness, death, and destruction expect the public to blindly entrust them with our food supply? GMOs aren't bred to be the answer to world hunger. They're manufactured to boost profits and encourage factory farming. Monsanto promises farmers higher yields with lower needs for pesticides, but really their patented seeds are designed to risk higher rates of pesticide use. The main ingredient in Roundup is glyphosate, which is now the most heavily used herbicide on Earth, and traces of it can be found throughout our farms, our water supplies, and our bodies. Infants routinely test positive for glyphosates received in utero and through their mother's breast milk. Long-term risks of exposure can lead to a lowered immune system, erectile dysfunction, infertility, and cancer. However, Monsanto has continued to fight declarations by administrations such as the World Health Organization that claim that glyphosate is a probable carcinogen. Their success in such legal battles has little to do with public opinion or scientific fact, and everything to do with the revolving door of politicians. Supreme Court Justice Thomas Clarence wrote the majority opinion on a key Monsanto case, despite having previously worked as a Monsanto lawyer. The FDA's Deputy Commissioner for Policy, Michael Taylor, was also a former Monsanto lawyer and played a key role in the approval of bovine growth hormone. It has since been shown to result in high levels of pus, antibiotic residues, and cancer-accelerating hormones in milk and meat products. Monsanto isn't just bad for our bodies, it's bad for our economy. Food is no longer the result of small local farmers, but instead of giant factory farms. Small farms across the world are going bankrupt after falling for Monsanto's false promises, and many farmers in India and Asia are committing suicide after losing farms that have been in their families for decades. Age-old traditions of saving seeds from season to season or sharing with neighbors are a thing of the past. Farmers find themselves completely dependent on purchasing seeds over and over again, while depending on chemicals to keep their produce up to standards. Over 60 countries across the world currently have restrictions or bans on GMOs, including all of the European Union, Australia, and Japan, which has resulted in a 99% loss of export. What's worse, Monsanto receives millions of dollars annually in subsidies funded by the taxpayers. In addition, the environmental impacts of Monsanto are catastrophic. Along with decades of history of pollution and contamination from their production and waste sites, repeated development of non-biodegradable plastics, and past and current usage of pesticides and herbicides have threatened our entire ecosystem. Many consider high doses of insecticides to be a major contribution to the decline of pollinators such as butterflies and bees. It's estimated that roughly 1/3 of our diet is the direct result of bee pollination. Without pollinators, Monsanto won't even be able to fall back on their promise of higher yields. There's still hope, however. Many of us across the world are becoming more and more aware of these atrocities and standing up against them. People are calling for their right to know and demanding food labeling, getting involved in local politics, and making election choices based on these expectations. They're standing up to a corporate giant by eating locally and even farming their own food. Some of the first successful civil cases against Monsanto have recently been settled. There's knowledge and power, so the most important thing you can do after leaving here today is to read more, to learn more, and to share that information as often as possible. Thank you.
Yay! That was wonderful, Kelsey. Thank you for that. Thank you for that wonderful and powerful presentation about Monsanto. We really appreciate that. And I'm just thinking here in beautiful Canfield Park in Corning, I noticed that the buckeye trees are in bloom. On our organic farm, the buckeye trees are covered with bees, and there's a loud buzzing sound. I don't see or hear any bees on the buckeye trees here. And I want to thank the sponsors of this event, which are the Finger Lakes group of the Sierra Club, the Green Party of Steuben County, the Coalition to Preserve New York, and Save Spencer Van Etten. So we very much appreciate all the sponsors. And now I'd like to introduce our second speaker, who is Reverend Marraine Kettell. And as I did want to mention about our first speaker that her son Philip, who is 3 months old, I heard him cheering on his mother during her speech, and I think he was very impressed by her speech too. But we're very honored to have Reverend Kettell here, and she has a family history of interest in GMOs. Thank you very much.
So to begin with, this is, I'll be honest, this has not been my thing for a while, but I'm a newbie. But when I was invited to speak today, I hesitated a little bit, only because my schedule, like many of yours, is pretty packed with many things. But I didn't hesitate for long because I heard the voice of my mother, which can be pretty insistent, as many of yours can too, who said, go for it. Professionally, my mother was a registered nurse who worked in the operating room for 4 decades. She and my father were always environmentally conscious, but in less 10 years or so that she worked in the hospital, my mother became a vocal advocate for environmental justice. She lobbied at the state level in Maine, where I grew up, as well as nationally. She spoke out against phthalates and toxic products, in addition to a handful of many other causes. My mother spoke out because of her career in healthcare, which fostered her learning about the effects of chemicals on the body, including types of cancer, which she too experienced. She spent so much time on her soapbox that the phrase endocrine disruptors became a punchline to many a joke in our family. My mother died suddenly last June during a retreat on a lake in Maine. In one of the articles she contributed to over the years, she stated that she would make noise as long as she could. And indeed she did. In fact, last summer when my family heard the news that France had taken steps to ban Roundup, we joked that she was now lobbying God. So that was the catalyst for my being here today. I'm digging just a little deeper, though, into rich soil rich with organic compost. I am here because of my vocation as an ordained minister of the United Church of Christ. From my mother's teaching, I am aware of the damage that chemicals such as those Monsanto uses have on the human body and on the planet. From my own professional background, I see it as an issue of environmental and social justice. It is simply a moral and ethical imperative to find alternative approaches to control weeds, pests, and all those things that are listed that don't harm us. So just to be theological for a moment, translating, when you hear the term sin, the historical use of sin is actually an archery term. The bigger the sin, the farther you are away from your mark. So translating that into its theological purposes, then it means that the bigger the sin, the further you are from your ideal relationship with God. Having been raised by environmentally maniacal parents in the context of the United Church of Christ, I will go as far as to say that the use of chemicals such as these is sinful, because it harms our greatest gifts of creation and humanity. Wherever we are across the theological spectrum, we have a moral and ethical imperative to speak out, to speak up, to make our voices heard in response to these forms of environmental and social injustices.
Thank you very much, Marraine. That was a very inspiring talk. Do we want to take a short break here? If there's any people that want to mix and match or whatever, or everybody's happy, everybody's comfortable?
Can I say something?
Yes.
We're going to have a couple petitions on the table if you haven't signed a petition for GMO labeling in New York State. We've delivered thousands of them to people who are our representatives, so there'll be a couple of those. There's also, I'll leave copies of an article I wrote. This one was published in the Moonlighter, Tioga County, Owego kind of thing. So if you have maybe a local newspaper in your community, there's also, I'll leave some copies of the article. And if you need an electronic copy, my email's in the article. And so feel free to read it yourself or take it with you. And if you can distribute it, go ahead. It kind of covers everything in a one-page thing. So
Great, thank you so much. And I want to say that we are going to have an open mic after our scheduled speakers, and we've also added a new speaker, Jonathan Latham, too, with saying a few words. So our next speaker is Liz Martin from Muddy Fingers Farm in Hector. Liz is an environmentally concerned farmer, an organic farmer. She sells at the Corning Farmers Market, I think the Ithaca Farmers Market, and I'm sure an Elmira Farmers Market. And she's going to talk to us about the benefits of local food and organic food, how that connects to the GMO issue. So welcome, Liz.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. So I'm Liz Martin, Muddy Fingers Farm, and you'll have to forgive me, I'm getting over a cold, so I'm a little stuffed up this morning. But I just want to talk a little bit about the benefits of buying from local farmers. Like all local businesses, local farmers, we spend our money in our community. We shop with our local business owners. I'm glad to know that when I walk into that local hardware store, they call me by name when I go in there. So much money is kept in our communities when we're able to support local businesses like farms and the small businesses that we shop at. In general, small farms are paying people a living wage, or they're paying people a fair wage. They're not. In general, small farmers are not using people who are being exploited to pick their vegetables and to grow their food. So that's something that we find important. There are GMOs starting to show up on some small farms. There are genetically modified sweet corns that some farmers are starting to grow, but otherwise, most of the crops in general you're not going to find when you get from a local farm have been genetically modified. So it's still, when you shop at a farmer's market, except corn, it's still a pretty safe place to know that you're avoiding GMOs. Of course, anytime you buy certified organic produce, you know that you're being able to avoid that genetically modified foods. And so it's just it's a great and important thing. We're coming up into local farmers market season, and to remember local farms, local foods, and it's a great way to keep your family safe from chemical sprays and genetically modified organisms. So, thank you.
Thank you, Liz. And we will take questions. We will take questions before the open mic. Our next speaker is Erin Riddle. Erin is the new chair of the Sierra Club New York State chapter, and she's a longtime activist on GMO issues. She has been working for several years now on getting GMO labeling enacted in New York, and she's going to talk to us about that and other matters as well. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you everyone for coming out today, and to Leslie and Marraine and Liz for speaking. We are an amazing group of people. We are standing up for ourselves. We are tired of having corporations force feed us toxic food, and we're not taking it anymore, right? Right. So, I want to start with a quote from Gandhi to frame what our activism has been like over the last few decades. And that quote, many of you may recognize. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. So that has been happening with us with our efforts to try to get GMOs out of our foods, and so that people can know what they're eating and take control of our local food system. So how do I know that? Because we've been through these stages, and this has been happening to us for the last few decades in our fight. So first they ignored us. When the FDA was first developing its policy on genetic engineering in the early 1990s, there was not a consensus about the safety of GMOs, even among the agency's own experts. The predominant opinion was that these foods entail unique risks, especially the potential for unintended harmful side effects, and that they cannot be considered safe, even though the FDA regarded them as generally regarded as safe, GRAS or GRAS. So there was an article that was published by the Organic Consumers Association by Stephen Drucker, and he wrote that despite ample evidence indicating lacking a consensus about safety, as well as lack of requisite evidence to confirm that, the FDA's decision makers, who acknowledge they've been operating under a policy to foster the U.S. biotech industry, declared that as long as GE food does not introduce a known toxin or allergen, they would approve it as generally regarded as safe. In 1999, the medical journal The Lancet strongly criticized the presumption that GE foods entail no greater risks of unexpected effects than conventional foods, stated that there are good reasons to believe that specific risk may exist, and that governments should have never allowed these products into the food chain without insisting on rigorous tests for effects on health. In January 2015, the peer-reviewed journal Environmental Sciences Europe published a statement signed by more than 300 scientists asserting that there is not a consensus about the safety of genetically engineered foods, and that their safety has not been adequately demonstrated. In addition to these scientific experts, policymakers and elected officials have long ignored us as their constituents. I first became involved with the issue of genetic engineering in the late 1980s, and I'm sure a lot of you have been involved for many years on the same issue. And when I spoke with elected officials about the impact of engineering on our environment, on ecosystems, on public health, our food systems, and our farmers, they ignored us. They didn't take us seriously. Then, they laughed at us. So several states have tried to pass labeling laws in the past, such as Prop 37 in California and similar bills in Washington State, Colorado, and Oregon. When these efforts failed, they made fun of those and us who expressed concerns about GMOs and wanted labeling. When Gwyneth Paltrow publicly called for labeling, the Huffington Post published an article with the title, "Thanks, Gwyneth, but we'll stick with scientific consensus on GMOs." And how many of us, when we spoke with elected officials and pro-GMO scientists, and they laughed at us. But they're not laughing anymore, because now they're fighting us. And here are the ways they are fighting us. They are spending lots of money to try to stop us. The New York Public Interest Research Group, or NYPIR, published a report indicating how much money labeling opponents spent trying to persuade our state elected officials to not vote for GMO labeling or contributing to their election campaigns. In total, 14 business groups which have reported lobbying on the GMO labeling bill contributed to the state political election campaigns and candidates in 2013. Altogether, these groups contributed nearly $500,000 to New York State political campaigns. These groups include Anheuser-Busch, Coca-Cola, DuPont, Kraft, Pfizer, and Monsanto. In comparison, guess how much GMO labeling advocates contributed in 2013? 0. In addition, labeling opponents spend lots of money lobbying against GMO labeling bills in 2013. Nearly $3.25 million. Groups involved in lobbying against GMO labeling include the Business Council of New York, Coca-Cola, Pfizer, Anheuser-Busch, the Farm Bureau, Bayer Healthcare, Kraft Foods, and many other entities, including Monsanto. In comparison, guess how much labeling advocates spent in lobbying for GMO labeling? Just under $500,000. That means that opponents outspent advocates by 6.5 to 1 in terms of lobbying. Another way they're fighting us, scare tactics. So a 2014 study from Cornell professor William Lesser, funded by companies opposed to labeling by the industry, maintains that the cost of labeling could be quite large for consumers. The study found that the annual cost for a family of 4 could range from a low of $44 per year up to $1,500 per year. The study gave at its best estimate that the bill would cause food costs in New York to go up about $1,000 a year for a family of 4. However, Consumers Union dissected and deconstructed this industry-funded report for all its faulty assumptions based on extreme and unsubstantiated scenarios that necessarily led to high numbers. Consumers Union concluded in its report that labeling could lead to a projected cost increase of $1.30 per year for a family of 4. But even that seems exaggerated. But that did not stop the Farm Bureau and the Coalition for Safe, Affordable Food and other labeling obstructionists from traipsing this study around the media and claiming that we will be faced with dramatic increases in food costs if we have labeling. In fact, the Coalition for Safe, Affordable Food even wrote in their email newsletter that labeling could increase food costs by $1,000 for the average American family per year. That's nearly the highest possible estimate identified in this unsubstantiated study from William Lesser. So another way they're fighting us, they're taking this to the federal level. The latest tactic is to take the fight to the Senate and the House of Representatives at the federal level, where industry allies in the House work to pass a terrible labeling bill, and the fight has now moved to the Senate. This legislation would include overturning state labeling laws that have already been passed, such as in Vermont, Connecticut, and Maine, prohibit other states from passing labeling laws in the future, and limit the FDA's ability to ever set national mandatory labeling laws. This is Monsanto's dream bill. But finally, we are winning. We are at the end stage of winning this fight. So labeling laws are going into effect already. That's one way we know that we're winning, because we already have labeling laws that have already been passed. Vermont will have a statewide mandatory labeling law has already passed, and will go into effect on July 1st. But of course, Monsanto and other corporations are fighting this process with a legal challenge. Maine and Connecticut also have laws but are waiting for conditional action from neighboring states, such as us, New York State. Another way we're winning is we already have labels that are starting to appear on food products. So in order to comply with Vermont's labeling law and avoid multiple labels, big food companies such as M&M, Mars, and Campbell's, General Mills, Kellogg's, ConAgra, and Frito-Lay have already put labels on their product indicating that those foods contain genetically engineered ingredients. So for example, I bought these in Little Owego, New York at the grocery store, and on the back it says partially produced with genetic engineering. And the same thing for these M&Ms, also say partially produced with genetic engineering. So we have companies that are already labeling because we have laws going into effect.
Were they more expensive?
They were not more expensive. And then people want labeling. That's another way that we're winning. Various polls indicate that approximately 90% of Americans want labeling, and 64 countries around the world already have labeling. So we are behind in terms of the global scale with regard to labeling. As I mentioned, 64 countries already have labeling, including all of the European Union countries, China, and Russia. We are behind China and Russia on labeling. And finally, we know we're winning because we're seeing progress in the New York State Legislature. So we have legislation that is moving both through the New York State Senate and Assembly, and we're pushing to get a final vote in the legislature before the end of session in June. So anybody, it's very important that you call your elected officials, call your state senators, your state assembly person, and tell them that you want mandatory GMO labeling in New York State. Bill numbers are A617 and S485. And we in the Sierra Club are working hard with many other organizations and coalition to push this. And Mike said we have some petitions here. We have some quarter sheets with information if people want more information about contacting your elected officials. So we are winning. We're very close to getting GMO labeling in New York State. They're not ignoring us anymore. They're not laughing at us anymore. Now they're fighting us, and we're almost at the finish line and winning.
Erin? The FDA just to change the labeling for sugar. Did you hear that?
Yeah. You can say that. In the,
Oh, okay.
the thing that,
If you don't know, the FDA just mandated changes to the labeling laws. The FDA just mandated changes to the labeling laws for how sugar content of different products is supposed to be labeled in bigger print, and I think it's going to say like what the daily percentage of sugar is contained in that thing. So like a can of Coke might say that it contains 150% of the daily amount of sugar that you should be taking. I just heard that. It just happened. So, but, you know, if the FDA can mandate that kind of thing and the companies are going to do it, you know, everybody squawking about we can't afford to do this, the price is going to go up. It's going to cost everybody $1,000 a year if they make us change the sugar labels. So it kind of tells you how bogus everything is. But like Erin said, if that DARK Act passes, the FDA won't have the authority to be able to do that as far as GMO labeling is concerned. So that's what you're fighting for.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Erin, for that excellent background on GMO labeling and the need to take action right now in New York. So we're lucky to have another speaker, Jonathan Latham, a former GMO researcher, now a GMO activist from Ithaca. We're delighted that he's joined us today, and we twisted his arm to say a few words to us.
Thank you, folks. Thank you for coming out today. It's been super interesting to meet you all. So yeah, my name is Jonathan Latham, and I'm from Ithaca, New York, and I run a small and co-found with my partner, a small non-profit, and we have a website called Independent Science News, which is part of the project of sharing information about GMOs, about agriculture, about pesticides, and you know, one of the most important things that people can do is share information to inform people. Because, you know, until recently, till the rise of the internet, the public was not informed about many, many things that happened in their food supply because they were relying on the mainstream media. So, but as you'll know, some of you may know, my background is as a genetic engineer. So pretty much from the first day of my PhD, I was making genetically engineered crops. And these were for experimental purposes only. But, you know, it became obvious to me that you could do dangerous things with GMOs if you weren't very careful about it, and if you were not thinking too hard about and getting outside of your reductionist paradigm. And so I had a colleague, for example, who was making GMOs with a protein that was called the RIP protein. And it was called, the RIP protein was a very accurate description of it. So a single molecule could kill a cell. But his idea was to make virus-resistant plants. Right? So he was making virus-resistant plants. And it was very successful, but no sane person would ever eaten those plants. Right? They're basically the protein that was being produced by those plants would also kill a person if it was expressed inappropriately. So, you know, the theory of the plants was it wouldn't be expressed except in the presence of a virus. But there was no way that you could ever verify that. So it was perfectly obvious that people could make dangerous things with GMOs. And, you know, what subsequently became apparent to me is that GMOs were not, as we were always told, ways of reducing pesticide use. They were not going to be involved in making a better food supply. They were not going to be involved in feeding the world. They were basically going to be involved in controlling the food supply. So if you control the seeds and the traits of those seeds, you have a potential as a multinational company to basically control the direction of agriculture. And that was the purpose of GMOs. I finally, you know, after a while of thinking about it, figured out, and you know, along with plenty of other people. And so at that point, you know, it became not just a scientific issue of concerns about health, but a whole bigger political issue. And as Erin said, you know, now we're faced with a situation where the GMO industry and the food industry is fighting labeling, fighting bans, fighting all kinds of popular uprising against what they're doing. And one of the organizations involved in that is Cornell University. So they've got a $5.6 million grant for an organization which calls itself the Cornell Alliance for Science. But I was in Rome recently in Italy, and they spoke at the Alliance for Science was invited to speak basically by the United Nations to speak on behalf of GMOs, and they told us they now had 6,000 people who were advocating around the world for promotion of GMOs. Right? So much for science. So you know, those are the battles that are going on. But there's, you know, a huge amount of consumer understanding and a growing food movement around the world, which means, you know, ultimately I believe we will win this battle. and that the food, but it's not one, will not be one until, you know, all of agriculture is organic. It will not be one just around the issues of GMOs and labeling, but when all of agriculture is organic, when all people are paid fairly inside the food system, and also when we have our democracy back. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. So before we start the open mic, I just want to see if there are any questions. Does anyone have questions for any of the speakers? Well, let's start the open mic, and I'm going to call out someone. Mary Campbell is here. She is a wonderful chef. She had a restaurant here in Corning and has a restaurant now in Prattsburg. And do you want to say a few words from the perspective of a chef, Mary?
Sure.
Okay, great. And I like your T-shirt. That's a great T-shirt.
Thank you. You know, I've been involved in healthful eating. My mother was my inspiration. Who said that? Yeah. And she was preaching against the evils of sugar and processed foods 60 years ago. People thought she was crazy. And, you know, she kind of got the last laugh, I suppose. But as a chef and having a business, which I don't have my restaurant anymore, unfortunately, but I am teaching young people at Abosi's how to cook. And I'm trying to influence them on the importance of this. I think getting out there and educating people is number one. I think social media is phenomenal because it's done so much to bring awareness to these issues. And I think that's how we're beginning to win the fights, you know, the small battles that that are out there. But eating, you know, look for those labels. Look for right now you might not be having people label that they have GMOs or made with GMO products, but the people that are labeling saying that they are GMO free, you know, take advantage of that, buy those products. I take pictures of them and put them on Facebook. I mean, even if it's somebody, a big giant like Jolly Time Popcorn has a non-GMO popcorn, and I shared it with you know, the world and went to their website and their Facebook page and thanked them, you know, for doing that. And anybody that you see that's doing the right thing before they have to, support that. You know, just remember to, you know, read your own labels and be careful of what you buy and what you're cooking with, and the world will be a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Anyone else want to? Darin.
Hello, my name is Darin Robbins. I'm a resident of Corning, a member of the Green Party. And for those of you who live here, you probably already know that last year I actually ran for mayor of Corning as a Green Party candidate. There is going to be an upcoming project called the Food is Free Project here in Corning. The idea is an updated version of the Victory Garden as a way to grow food for the community, to share in the neighborhoods and in the community. There is a Facebook page set up, so if you are using Facebook, I recommend you go there. They have a lot of great information about this project, which is actually a nationwide thing, but we're trying to do it locally. And if you're not from here, I hope you would be able to take those ideas and spread them in your own communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Darin. Anyone else want to say? Peter?
Hi, I'm Peter Gamba, and I was with the Committee to Preserve the Finger Lakes, and for years we went after hydrofracking, and this is very similar in some ways as when you organize and you kind of try and educate people, and everybody's kind of said a lot of things I was going to say. There's a couple of things I would like to add. GMOs. There's some medical research that says the GMOs are not served well by our digestive enzymes. Okay, and they go into the waste part of our body, and sometimes they don't come out. So that's something I think we need to kind of share with people more and more, that they're not successfully digestible from a healthy standpoint. Yesterday I read on the internet or someplace, no, at the BBC News, that Bayer, the company Bayer, is considering buying Monsanto. So I think what we need to do is kind of get Bayer's attention and say don't buy them and let them go under. Okay. And we have a personal challenge in our house where we have a farmer next to us who's a Mennonite farmer who uses GMO corn to feed his dairy cows. So we haven't addressed it yet, but we're in the process of trying to talk to him and say, hey, this wouldn't be good for our water since we have water wells. So it's become a personal thing. And I guess it's finally, I mean, I think we've all talked about it. There was a book written a few years ago about leadership called Leadership Matters. And in one of the chapters there, it said, you know, politics is like a 3-act play. The first act is the grassroots people getting the leaders' attention, but not the leaders specifically, the people that influence the leaders. And then the second act is the people that influence the leaders get the leaders' attention, and the third act is the leaders passing whatever. They do what needs to be done. So we're all part of the 3-act play. You know, I think we're a part of Act 1 and Act 2, and I really appreciate everybody doing all the stuff that they're doing because it's really beginning to make a difference. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Can I have a PS? Yes, Mary can have a PS.
Yes.
I don't do well when I'm put on the spot. After I got to think about what I was saying, I think one of the most important things we need to do is buy organic. Most importantly, buy locally. You know, support your local farmers, especially the ones that are growing organic food, and grow your own. You know, forget your lawn, grow a garden.
CSAs, Mary, CSAs.
Very good.
CSAs.
Very good postscript. You, sir, were telling us about the film that you've been showing. Do you want to say a few words about the film? And you gave some copies out today. What's the name of it? Okay.
It's The World According to Monsanto. It starts out basically where Roundup was labeled as perfectly safe. And then later on, they recanted and said it was not really safe. So originally, yeah, they always say it's perfectly safe. Agent Orange was perfectly safe. DDT was perfectly safe. But later on, when the science became evident, they realized they're just lying, basically.
So that film is a good source. Kelsey gave us a great talk about Monsanto, and Erin also gave us a lot of information about sort of the evolution here. But this film is something else. It's good to watch.
It is, yeah. It's coming back to me now a little bit.
I put you on the spot.
I don't want to say senior moment, but Monsanto has spread into Central and South America, and they showed these kids that would run through basically a Monsanto Roundup sprayed field, and they got sores on their ankles and their feet. They were barefoot. They were just, you know. So it shows that it's poisonous even if you don't ingest it. So what is it going to do to you when you do ingest it? You know, it's poisonous to the epidermal layers. So
that's a very important point.
Oh yeah. It's worth watching. It's depressing, but it is worth watching.
So anyone else got a few words to say? I know that, Erin, you arranged for Jonathan to speak to the Binghamton Sierra Club, I think, and the Finger Lakes Sierra Club. I know we've agreed to sponsor you speaking too, but I'm not sure if we set a date. But I also wanted to talk about other next steps that, you know, what's happening. The Sierra Club is working on this, and the GMO labeling, the Green Party is working on this. We have started this new group, Food Sovereignty of the Southern Tier. We'd like to get, you know, that group to become active and work with these other groups on issues involving GMO and locally grown food. So if you're interested in joining us on that, give me your contact info. Does anyone else want to, Paula, do you want to say something about Save Van Etten and what you guys have been doing? Have you particularly done anything on GMO issues?
Just when we had Jonathan come and speak.
So Jonathan came to speak to you as well. Okay, great. And Peter.
On GMO OMG.
Okay. You're showing the film
We did show
GMO, oh my God. Okay, OMG. And Peter, your group has been showing GMO films, right?
We've been showing that film, GMO OMG.
Okay, and that's what Mary says on her shirt. So the Committee to Preserve the Finger Lakes has also been doing things. Anyone else? Erin.
Just a comment about the film GMO OMG. Anyone can screen that in your community if you want to. With a coalition, we've been working with Food and Water Watch to pass GMO labeling, and they have secured screening rights to be able to screen this film. So all you have to do is set up a time, place, and a venue, and you can screen it to your local community, and the screening rights are already available to you for any organization.
So thank you, and a big hand for Eddie Rodriguez, who has videotaped us today. We really appreciate, Eddie, all your videotaping, and it's great to be able to see things on the web if you haven't been able to get to them. And we want to thank Ken Fogarty for providing support services for the videographer. So thanks to both of them. Thanks to all of you for coming out. And this is our second March on Monsanto. Darin and Kelsey and I worked with to help organize one 2 years ago. And
3 years ago.
3 years ago. 3 years ago. And we hope to have another one next year. So stay in touch. There won't be a Monsanto, says Jonathan. March against Bayer. So thanks, everybody.